Continuing on with the Let's Beat series, how about some Back to the Future? This video is a little different from the others in that I can't really show you how to beat this game. I can only get you in position for a chance to beat it because, infamously, this game's finale is a brutally unfair game of chance. So before you embark on this journey, know that at the very end of the slog, you have to get the DeLorean up to 88 miles per hour amid a fury of lightning strikes that slow you down, and if you don't cross the line at 88 miles per hour, you don't get another shot at it. The game is officially over, even if you have lives to spare. If that sounds perfectly okay with you, then stick around. The general layout of the game is this. There are 4, I'll call them mini-games, separated by 16 Hill Valley Street sections. Your first stop will be at Lou's Diner, where you have to throw shakes at 50s-era greasers coming to beat you up. Next, there's the school, where you have to avoid smooches from your mom by holding up a book. Then there's the dance, where you have to play some sick guitar. And finally, there's the dreaded DeLorean sequence where, depending on how it ends for you, you get to decide whether you despise this game or just generally have a distaste for it. Before you can partake in each of those minigame sequences, you have to make your way down the street collecting clocks. You don't have to collect all the clocks, but you need to collect enough clocks to keep at least one of the 3 people in the picture at the bottom visible, which include you, your brother, and your sister. If Linda, your sister, or Dave, your brother, the 2 people on the ends, fade away, you can always get them back by collecting more clocks. But if Marty disappears from the center, it's a lost life. You start with 4 lives, which you can lose by either running out of time on the street before getting to the end, failing out of one of those minigames, or having your picture fade away. And worth noting that simply getting hit by an enemy in the street doesn't take a life, and you'll probably get knocked down a ton. But obviously, getting knocked down slows you down, and it's ultimately the timer you have to worry about. You can gain new lives for every 10,000 points you collect, and a little more on points in a bit. So yeah, that's right, you're racing against 2 clocks, technically. There's a timer at the bottom that you have to race against to get to the end of each street section, and there's the fading picture that you need to collect clocks for before it completely fades out. You got it? Alright, this game gets a lot of deserved flack. But I'm one of those weirdos who actually enjoys the street sections. It's not really possible for me to give you a complete walkthrough of these sections. I'm not sure if the enemies appear or behave randomly each time you play or not, but maybe you can memorize it. But I just follow a few simple rules to keep myself alive. And with that, let's hit the streets. It's the 1950s, you're moving down the street on foot. There are 2 helpful items that you need to pick up after a certain amount of time, and I used to think it was related to the number of clocks you picked up, but it might just be on a timer. Either way, eventually a bowling ball will appear. Grab it. It's helpful for taking out some of the enemies in your way, and, of course, striking the bowling pins for points. Definitely use the bowling ball when it makes sense to, but don't go out of your way to take out enemies, or you're more likely to get yourself killed that way. It's also not wise to spam the bowling ball attack, as it can take out the clocks that you need to pick up. It's also worth noting the hitboxes for enemies are tiny, so you have to be perfectly vertically aligned with them for the ball to hit. The second thing you can get is the skateboard, and you have to have already picked up the bowling ball in order to spawn it. And again, I don't know if it's on a timer or related to the number of clocks you grab or what. Sometimes the bowling ball and the skateboard will spawn in hard-to-reach places that are just setting you up for death. It sucks, but it's best to avoid those until the right opportunity comes along. At first, the skateboard will feel a little unwieldy to control, but it's pretty handy, especially toward the end levels, at least for finishing a street section before the clock expires. Every little bit of skateboard you can use helps. You can shoot bowling balls from the skateboard as you move to take out things in your path, and you can also jump over certain obstacles like fences and benches and things, but you can't jump over everything for some reason. You can jump when on foot as well, but you get more distance on the board, of course, with all that speed. If you get hit while on the skateboard, you'll lose it and the bowling ball, returning on foot, and you will need to wait and pick those items back up again. The first handful of street levels are fairly easy. My only advice here would be to stay low on the screen and not get too eager to run ahead and grab clocks, or you could be walking into damage. Also, by hanging back, the bees that show up are more likely to fly off screen than to circle back for you. The more skilled and familiar you get with these sections, the braver you can afford to be, but to start, I'd just hang back. Now, by attacking the people and the bees and the bowling pins in your way, you earn points. And again, every 10,000 points equals an extra life, and those will come in handy for all but one stage in this game. The last one. Yes, I'm going to keep reminding you of the ending. It's best you not forget. Now once you're at the end of any street section, which you'll recognize as coming up because the street widens into an intersection, you can jump mid-air before the timer stops for some extra points, up to 900. And then after 4 successful street sections, you finally reached Lou's Diner. Now a lot of folks usually get here and get wiped out, and then chuck this game across the street, and that's understandable. Because if you fail here, or in the next 2 minigames, the game makes you repeat the last street section over again before you get another shot, or run out of lives. And if that wasn't bad enough, they make you listen to the same 4 seconds of music looping over and over while you do it. Now here in the old diner, Marty is over at the bar chucking root beer floats at Biff's Greaser Buds. One thing that a lot of folks don't seem to know is that from the start, you're armed with one screen clear ability, the Super Shake. If you throw the Super Shake, all the bullies on screen take a hit, so it's best to save it for when you're in a pinch. Despite the number of stools you see here, which can kind of visually throw you off, there are only 6 throwing lanes, and it can sometimes be tricky to line up those middle ones visually. I find it helpful to stare at Marty and line up the oncoming goons in my periphery. That helps me visualize their alignment better. Meanwhile, I focus on the middle 4 lanes and go up and down, chucking the shakes regardless of whether I see anyone on screen. If a guy shows up in the bottom or top lane, I can easily get to there, but getting to one of the middle ones in a pinch is a little trickier to do. Now at some point this method breaks down because there are just so many guys on screen, and you have to resort to the screen clear ability or just by reacting quickly. But things start off pretty easy, and there are a few waves that happen around every 15 or so guys. Now at around 28 guys, a waitress will appear on screen. If you manage to wipe out the other goons and not hit her as she makes her way to the bar, she'll give you a second to Super Shake, so try not to hit her. You cannot get past this stage until you take out 50 guys, or else they bash Marty's face off the wall and send you back down the street. You can't get any more than 99 guys, but if you can keep going well past 50, I recommend it for the points so that you can hoard some lives. Now once you're past that, you're back out to the street. Now it's more of the same, except now the streets are yellow. High noon, perhaps. Worth noting that the oil slicks don't hurt you, but just about everything else does. Also, if your clock is fading down really far, if you collect 100 clocks, the picture at the bottom will be completely refreshed, so something to keep in mind. Now, I don't know if this will happen to you, but at some point playing this game, the street sections gave me like Stockholm Syndrome, and I actually started to enjoy playing them. And it might have something to do with the horrible hypnotic looping music forcing me into a trance. But once again, I don't have outright tips for these sections of the street. They don't really get particularly annoying until the second half of the game coming up here, but maybe worth noting that the hula hooping ladies and some of the other enemies now shoot at you, so if you don't have a dead-on shot with the bowling ball, it's best just to stay away from them. Now, you've made it to Hill Valley High Science Lab and your mother wants to give you smooches. Weird, passionate ones you only want her to give your dad. The best line of defense? A book. Unlike the dudes at the cafe, Lorraine's love continuously flows in a connected pattern, so there's no guesswork here. You have to follow the stream of hearts up and down. My best advice here is to use a single button press on the D-pad for each up and down movement of her heart stream. Your hitbox here is actually pretty big, and you'll notice that you have more slots to be in than she has lanes to throw in. I tried to illustrate that here somewhat. So I'm just saying, you don't have to be exactly on the heart to deflect it, but as time goes, she'll get faster and do little ups and downs and try to trick you. This took me a few tries to get the hang of, and she uses the same pattern every time, so anticipating where she's going helps, but failing, unfortunately, means replaying the last street level again, just like at Lou's. And just like at Lou's, you have to deflect 50 hearts, but you can go all the way up to 99. Once you're past that, now it's back to the streets. They're orange now with red sidewalks. I guess it's sunset. And as you'd expect, there are even more enemies, more bees, more projectiles, more clutter. The game's difficulty is really about to ratchet up here in the street section, so hopefully you've been gaining points from taking out enemies with bowling balls, you have gotten comfortable maneuvering and jumping with the skateboard, and you are jumping at the end of each level for some extra points to stockpile those lives. Once you make it through these street sections, again, I don't have specific tips for these, but once you get to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, it's time to shred. This is the easiest minigame by far, at least if you know what to do. The manual isn't helpful here at all, and this part always took me out as a kid, but it's painfully simple once I figured it out. So you can turn Marty either left or right, and he has 3 positions on each side where he can hold the guitar: high, medium, and low. You will know, obviously, which side to face by which direction the note is coming towards you from. And you'll know the height you should be in by the type of note that it is, either a flat, a sharp, or an eighth. As the notes approach Marty from either side, face the correct direction, and be in the right height position to receive the note, and continue until the meter on the right is full of love? You can miss some notes here. It just slows the meter down, but don't miss too many or it's back to the streets. Once the meter is full, the minigame is satisfied, and your ma and pa kiss down at the bottom, thus ensuring you and your brother and sister will be eventually born. Easy stuff. But now for the hard stuff. Back out on the mean streets of Hill Valley, it's nighttime, and nighttime is really when the creeps come out. And more bees, surprisingly. One thing you should know, and a lot of people don't, is because we just got our parents to make out, we no longer have to worry about the picture at the bottom, which means picking up clocks is not necessary. Now, you can still, for points, and you might want to for lives, but one of our 2 ticking clocks is now out of order, which is a good thing. But regardless, these sections are really tough. I don't know how random this all can be, but for the first level out of the gate here, I find some success riding the curb on the right at the very bottom of the screen, and by sticking to the curb, I can dodge or shoot the bees, jump over obstacles, take out the bowling pins. There's one section where you have to cross the street, but just get back on the curb. In the latter half of the stage, this strategy comes apart a little, but I find the early part of the stage to be the toughest anyway. And I should point out, I really only tried that strategy on the skateboard, so if you're on foot here, your experience with curbing may vary. For the next section, I found that riding down the middle of the right sidewalk was best, at least at the start. There are a few enemies right down the center of the sidewalk, so shooting up ahead while keeping an eye on the projectiles hurled by onlookers proved to work until I got later into the stage. Remember, we don't care about clocks anymore, so shoot away. And don't forget, you can hop these fences with the skateboard. Later in the level, I just rode the curb whenever possible. Really, sometimes the only advice to give here is to be lucky and good at the same time. And then skipping to the last stage here right before the final boss, if you want to call it that, I was somehow able to ride straight down the middle, firing off the occasional shot and hopping over things in my way all the way to the end. So fair to say this last leg of the street section is the easiest, which would be a real blessing if failing at the next and last stage sent you back here if you failed, but as I've already alluded to multiple times, no matter how many lives you've stockpiled at this point, none of that matters for what's about to come. So, you've survived 16 grueling street sections while listening to the psychological warfare that this game commenced upon your ears. Let's get this bad boy up to 88 miles per hour and get home to 1985 where we belong. Only your D-pad works here on this stage. You can move the DeLorean left and right, and you can make it go faster by holding up. As you move, you'll see lightning streak across and strike the road. If you drive over where they've hit, it slows the car down. And that's bad, because if you're not at 88 miles per hour at the very end, it's an instant game over. And the lightning strikes are always random, so there is no way to outsmart this. You really just have to be a little lucky. There's a chance that at the very end, right before the finish line, you could be fast enough to correct the DeLorean to the area free of strikes in time to get through, but I really don't know how reliable you can be at doing that each time. Given that you get one shot at this every playthrough, and it's always random, it's a tough thing to ever become good at. So here's my strategy, which is just as much of a gamble as doing nothing different. But if you slide your car left and right, you'll notice that the DeLorean can overlap the curb some, and technically go off the road where the lightning strikes. And again, I don't know if this helps or is statistically superior to other methods, but my logic here is that since the lightning strikes only hit the road, by inching yourself over to where you can be off the road even a little, you might be escaping some probabilities of being slowed down at the end by a rogue strike on that side. Now, I've played through the game a handful of times, and this hasn't worked every time, but it's worked more than anything else I've tried. If you're lucky enough to squeak through at 88 miles per hour, congratulations, you win. But if not, then it's back to the title screen with you. And that's going to do it for how you may be able to potentially beat Back to the Future on the NES. Now, as always, look out for bees, and thanks for watching.